There is a story I want to tell you. There's a question I want to ask you as well. We've had Black Americans moving back to the continent, particularly Ghana. We've had so many of them moving over there. The president by then, Nana Akufo-Addo, issued a mandate and he issued the permit that would allow Black Americans move into Ghana visa-free. This was happening in 2019, and 2019 marked 400 years since the first slave ship left the African coast of Cape Coast all the way to Atlantis, or if you like, you can call it Virginia. It's a debate whether it landed in Atlantis or whether it landed in Virginia. What really matters is the situation of Black Americans in the continent today. Apart from Ghana, we've had other countries as well, such as South Africa, Socialist Republic of Tanzania, or nchi ya ujamaa wa Tanzania. And Tanzania in itself is a combination of two states, you know. Tanzania back then was called Tanganyika, and before that it was not unified by another island that is close to itself. The island is called Zanzibar, you know. So if you bring Tanganyika and Zanzibar together, you create what we call Tanzania, you know. So we have Tanzania being an abbreviation or being an acronym for the two countries, you know, or rather the two states, Tanganyika and Zanzibar. You get it. Coming back to the reality right now, Black Americans living in the continent are facing a lot of difficulties as told by other Black Americans. You know, it is a story. Each individual's experience is very subjective, you know. There is no a written law, there is no a written standard that every Black American will experience this. You might experience corruption, you might experience bribery, you might experience police brutality, you might experience racism, but in Africa we don't often have that. However, the video we are about to see right now is one of prejudice, you know, something which has blown my mind a lot. The person who was speaking in this video, I myself, I have spoken with them on a live interview. We've had a live interview that went around 2 hours, you know. The interview we had was in 2023. He was very vocal, he was very supportive, he was very positive, he was very optimistic about African Americans moving back to the continent. But right now, Mark Meets Africa has left Tanzania and he is in he went back to USA, you know. He came to Africa just around the time of the year of return, you know, when the hype was too big. He didn't go to Ghana, he moved to Tanzania. Maybe that is one of the reasons why he left, you know. So Mark Meets Africa is saying that you shouldn't stay where you are not wanted for too long. If you feel you are not wanted for too long, just leave. In the video, he entitles it, do not be in the jungle more than you need to be. The jungle, he didn't really say jungle. I think he said the wilderness. He likened Africa to the wilderness, you know. So I want us to watch it, listen to Mark's argument. I shall get back with a deep, critical analysis. Let's dive in.
And I think a lot of people who were coming at the time for some 5 years ago came for very similar reasons. They felt a calling to come to a place that was new and different, and in a way they should have felt a connection that was almost unspoken. And for a lot of us, we did feel that for the first up to 2 years. Some people are still feeling it even now. But I do know there were a lot of lessons in it. Where do I start? I say the title Leave Africa or Don't Go to Africa or whatever the title is. It's something along those lines, I know. And I put that title because the message that was put in my spirit probably a year ago was, or almost a year ago, was to tell people they can leave. You know, I know of a lot of people that came specifically to Tanzania, some to Kenya, others to South Africa, some to Ghana, some to the Gambia, and they came and they were doing so many beautiful and incredible things. They were connecting with people, and then somehow, some way along the way, there was this awakening, this realization amongst a lot of people that there was just something off, and it was that people weren't as friendly as they seemed, or they weren't as honest as they could be, and at first I think a lot of people made excuses for it, and then over time it became inexcusable. Again, this isn't a bashing Africans video. There's already too many of those out there. This is just explaining it from my perspective in the way I and a lot of people saw it unfold. And it got to a point where it seemed deliberate and targeted and almost strategic, you know? People with pretty decent intentions that wanted to do something in the place that they felt they were connected to, whether it was through their ancestors or through whatever else, they felt like they were being poorly received. And I wondered about it myself because I wasn't being poorly received. I did pretty well in Tanzania, where I started, or where I first went. And so I sidetracked what I was trying to do there, and which was just to be and immerse myself in the culture and, you know, develop a relationship with the people as family. I sidetracked that to investigate, in a sense, what was going on with predominantly the African American community that was coming over. They were the ones having a really tough time, sadly. And so I'd hear stories about, you know, the unfair treatment and all this stuff. And you can expect that in any foreign country. When you're an American and you go to a foreign country, you might be overcharged, you might be cheated, you might be, you know, lied to in some other way. You could be scammed, you could be taken advantage of in so many different ways. But I think it hit harder. For some reason, it felt more personal. Because these were people that were moving over here. They weren't tourists, or trying to be tourists at least. Some of them were, but I think a lot of the ones I interacted with were not trying to be tourists. They were trying to move and reconnect with their ancestral roots. And unfortunately, the things they noticed didn't sit well with them. Some of them, well, a lot of them. But what happened was a growing tension. And it seemed like the more the community, which was hardly a community because there were so many different ways we divided ourselves, and there were so many people coming for, I believe, the wrong reason. You have a lot of people that were coming because they hated America. They were mad. They didn't want to be in this, you know, system that they said was killing them and draining them and robbing them and all this terrible stuff. And for some of them, it was true. But I think there was a lesson in it for some people that believed that the problem was location alone. Because I think a lot of people saw that while racism may have been avoided, prejudice was the new thing they had to deal with when they went over there. Because there was a very strong prejudice in some places towards specifically African Americans. And which is odd, because you'd think that Africans wouldn't think like that. And again, it's not everyone. I just want to clarify that, because some people hear trigger words and they don't always take a breath and say, well, what is he actually trying to say? We're so quick to react, right? We need to be responsive and not reactive. And so that was a thing that people had to go through. And I think a lot of us felt we had to be here. And we really did think that we had to see everything we planned through. And I was definitely someone who thought this. I have 4 businesses registered in Tanzania. And before that, I had one NGO registered in Tanzania. So 3 of them were when Magufuli was the leader of the country, and 2 of them were after. And I can say that I noticed a shift in the importance of the leadership of a country, because what happened in the 2 years that I was able to do things in Tanzania, you know, when I first registered the businesses that I did, it was like night and day to the last 2 years. One was in not easy process, but it was doable. And the next one was darn near impossible. The amount of corruption and bribery needed just to register a business. We're talking $10,000 land surveys for 5 acres. We're talking $6,000 business registration processes. And again, these may not sound like big numbers to some people, but keep in mind, a lot of people weren't going over there with gigantic budgets. These are people's savings, or maybe they're working some online job, or maybe they, you know, were doing something else. But a lot of them, or some of them, were actually coming and going. So I knew some families that were coming, and they'd stay for a few months, and then they'd go work in America, and then come back and go, and come back and go. And that was a pretty cool strategy. But everyone had these different strategies. And what happened was it became so ridiculous. And again, I've talked to so many people who have the same problem. There's videos on it, there's people talking about it. I think we get a little harsh and maybe even emotional when we discuss it, and it kind of makes some people roll their eyes at it. But the truth still stands that there was an intentional system of corruption in place that prevented any legitimate business for a time from being done. You know, it was sad, and it's still sad, but I fell into the trap, just to get to the point of the video, of thinking that it was, you know, my job to stay and push and push and push and push against something that was done. And I poured more time and more energy and more resources into projects that were not going to succeed at that point, because the power dynamic in the country had shifted, the mindset had shifted. You look at what some of the people were saying on the streets where it really matters, and they were saying, oh my gosh, this new leader is going to endorse and enforce corruption. They're all for it. They agree with it. Not saying the last one didn't do it, but, you know, take it up to another level with this new one. And the sad thing is, some people were happy. They were agreeing with it. They were finally free to be how they were. So when you went into government offices, there was a very different energy. There was this, I'm going to cheat you and you're going to like it energy. And we all felt it, and you couldn't say anything about it. It was nothing was going to get done. Now, some people made it work. Some people couldn't make it work. A lot of people couldn't make it work. Unfortunately, they didn't say the right words or do the right dance or, you know, coddle the right image. Ego, I guess, is the right word. And so they didn't get what they needed to get done. I, unfortunately, well, I'll say I started with, you know, trying to play that game. And I got a lesson in that. And the lesson in that was, even if you play the game, if someone doesn't want to, they won't. And unfortunately, there was a lot going on in those offices. I've gotten into trouble in those offices for calling out certain things, calling out corruption. I've been in trouble for that. I don't know if some of you who know me know that I've been in a Tanzanian jail 3 times because of certain things. One was firing somebody who didn't want to work. Another one was calling, oh man, you just can't call out corruption. You got to act like it doesn't exist and play some mind game, and that's not how some people operate. That's compromising, you know. And I'm not saying go to the rooftops and say this is corruption, but it's a fine line, and it's a tiptoe eggshell sort of dance you have to do there. And I don't think a lot of people want to do that, especially a lot of older folks going over there. Some of them were just there and they were retiring, and that's okay. So they didn't run into too many issues, but eventually they ran into certain issues that they didn't think they'd have to deal with, right? Again, old, young, family, single, everyone was having similar issues. And you can go and look up horror stories, not just in Tanzania, funny enough. Ghana was having a lot of issues with the government, and Gambia was having a lot of issues, I think, with the people there. It was a very strong opposition. But I say all that to get back on point, which is I think we stayed longer than we needed to. A lot of people. I knew people that were there. They weren't trying to do business. They weren't trying to do anything significant in that way. And they felt the burden of being there. And they knew that the ancestors or God or the universe, because each one kind of had a different belief, they knew they were called there. I knew I was called there. And I somehow also knew when it was time to go. And the mistake I made is I did not listen to that feeling. The feeling that said, you don't have to stay in a place that treats you like this. You don't have to be in this environment that you can choose to walk away from. You don't have to stay in this wilderness. Funny enough, Tanzania used to be called Tanganyika. And if you Google what that word means, it actually means the wilderness or the arid plain. It means both of those things. And so that was a sign for me to go, and a lot of other people too. And I think we stayed longer than we should have. We said, no, we'll just push through it. We'll just keep on persevering. And there comes a time where we're striving at some point, and we didn't leave when we were supposed to. So my big mistake was I stayed, and I decided if I could just pull more resources into this, if I could just go further with it, if I could just make it happen, even if it's by force, then it'll all be okay. And that wasn't true. That wasn't what I was supposed to do. I made the mistake of feeling obligated to something that no longer had the favor of God on it. And unfortunately, many others made the same mistake in their own way. I can only speak from how I made it, because I know it now after reflecting on it and wondering why. And the lesson was, don't stay in certain places. That if it could be this place, it could be the next place. It doesn't have to be one place. It could be anywhere. If you're led to go, then go. And if you're led to leave, then leave. There's so many people that suffered because they stayed there. And there's so many people that are suffering because they're staying there. I just got a message from someone the other day, and it was a request of some sort to help with the process of transferring documents from the last company that I had registered in Tanzania into the new company that all the assets were transferred over to, into their company. And again, I'm still kind of trying to piece together what all that means, because I don't know what the lawyers have done and didn't do. But to give some context to the people who know and watch this channel, we had a business that was trying to bring people over and take care of them when they were there and build a community and have a land and housing project. And it didn't really flourish the way we wanted it to. I Unfortunately, the obstacles were just too much to overcome, and the barriers were just they were there, and they weren't barriers that we were supposed to overcome. I think they were barriers to say this isn't the right way. And so when everything went the way it went, and I finally made the personal decision, and really from a business standpoint, I had to make this decision as well. And it was basically, I can't continue doing this. I have to pack it up and leave. I got to shut this business down. I have to finish it off and do what I do. And I gave the lawyer that we were using at the time the list of instructions on what to do, signed everything, all this stuff, thinking this is done. He'll inform the people and make all the necessary legal arrangements to close this off nicely. I find out just a few days ago that those things that were supposed to be done were not done. I mean, this has been months now. It's been over 4 months now, and none of it was done. Not a single bit of it. Not even the lawyer did the right thing. And this was with the oversight of all these people that were involved. And again, I have to, before I say too much, I have to find out more. But I believe that a lot of the people that were involved with the company I had set up are now involved in this new company that all the documents are supposed to be transferred over to. And I don't think the lawyer did anything. I don't think the government offices did anything. And yet they want to be paid all the time. This is the sad reality of doing business in many African countries. And I'm not going to say it's just Africa, because it happens all over the world. But the problem there is there's little to no accountability. You can't just say, this is wrong, I'm going to report you to the Anti-Corruption Bureau. The Anti-Corruption Bureau's website says that if you record corruption, that's a crime. If you, it's so ridiculous that you would think it's intentional, and it is. And just being honest with you, that's what it seems like. None of us are that big a fool that we believe everything we're told. And there were some people who at first took everything in Africa as a good thing. Because it's not America, that means the food is cleaner. And because it's not America, that means the air is better. And because it's not America, that means the water is not poisonous. And because it's not America, that means it's better. They were so mad at America that they blindly loved this new place they were in, only to find out, some of them found out in weeks, some of them in months, and some of them in years, that Africa had the same ugliness that every place in the world has. There's good and bad in every place, and Africa is no different. You might see more of it in some places and at different levels. I think in the States, a lot of the corruption happens high up enough that most normal people don't notice it, you know. It's real subtle. And in a lot of developing places, like most of many countries in Africa, there's an obvious corruption. It's very obvious. It's on the streets. It's in the shops. It's low enough that you can see it and feel it, hear it, and deal with it on a daily basis. And that wears you out in a different way. And so I say all this to say, you don't have to stay in that place. If you're still in Tanzania or Kenya or Ghana or South Africa or the Gambia or wherever else people are going to in large numbers, because those are the ones that I knew people were going to in pretty big groups. A lot of traffic to those places. And again, I'm talking people that wanted to live in Africa, not just people visiting, people that were looking to pack up and move. And I just want to say to those people, you can leave if you really do feel stuck, because that's one of the, devil, the enemy, the shadow of the world, whatever you call them. That's one of the traps, is to get you stagnant and stuck and thinking, oh, that I just have to wait for the thing to happen. But that thing will never happen. Because I waited and waited and waited and waited and waited for this business and for certain things to come into place and for certain processes to complete. To this day, they're still not complete. Why? Because they're not supposed to be. If I could do it and it still not get complete, if a 50-year-old can do it and it still not be complete, if some retired people can do it and it still not be complete, if couples can do it and it still not be complete, sorry. If, all these people can try and try and try and it's still not getting done, maybe it's not meant to be done. If a group can walk into an office and it still doesn't get done, I'm sorry to say it, there's only so much a person can do. Staying there would be such a ridiculous move. Now, am I saying I'm done forever? No. But I'm not going to wait around idly while people and processes take their time, intentionally at that. I know how the corruption works in East Africa. I can't speak for the rest of the continent, but I've been on a few sides of it. Not the one doing it, but I've seen it from a few different angles, talked to people about it, and I think I've got a decent enough understanding of how it works, and a lot of it is intentional. It's fully intentional. It's personally motivated. It's based on some sort of prejudice. A lot of it is unspoken, and it's sad. It really is. But I don't have the energy to put into that and waste the gifts and talents that I'm supposed to be planting, right? In some way, the gift of joy and peace and love and all these things that are just stagnant in such places that don't receive them well. And I had to make the choice, stay and suffer or go and do the next thing, knowing that eventually you can make amends for what didn't come to fruition in one place and do it in another place, or do it at another time, or, with the right people this time. And so I'm not done doing business. I'm not done doing things in Africa, and I'm not done dealing with East Africa or Tanzania or any specific country or person. I just know that I and many others need to move, and it doesn't have to be a physical movement. I mean, move on mentally, emotionally, sometimes physically. And that's what we have to do for the sake of your peace, for the sake of your joy, for the sake of the love in your heart. Leave that place, because you who are staying, and I know some people that are staying because, number one, they feel stuck, stagnant. Some people are staying because they're just waiting for this thing to play out, but they're in a loop. Every day they suffer. They don't want to go outside. They don't want to walk the streets. They don't want to walk the markets. They're getting all these vicious looks, and that's because their spiritual discernment has become sharper. That's the whole point of the wilderness, is to sharpen your senses. It's to increase you. It's to refine you. But you don't stay in it. It's a transitional place, and that's what it was for me. And so I regret staying as long as I did. Do I regret going? No. I enjoyed it, especially the first 2 years. It was incredible. But sometimes we just have to, some people say trust your gut, your intuition or whatever. That's what it kind of came down to, I think, is that it just did not feel right. And the suspicion was confirmed. Months later, nothing has been done. That's the trend most people that I knew who were doing things over there experienced. That's the trend they had to deal with, was waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, only to be told, oh, it's complicated, oh, it's very difficult, as if there was no process to do the things that we needed to do. And all I heard when I heard that was, I don't want to do it unless. And the confusing part was they wouldn't always tell you what it is they needed for you to get it done. You could buy them a computer. You could slip them 100. You could do all these things, and the answer was still, oh, it's complicated. Oh, you know, it was enraging in some ways looking back on it, dealing with that. And you get, and I speak the language, but I would go into offices sometimes and I'd act like I didn't know what they were saying. And some of them find it humorous that we want to do anything there. Some of them find it so funny. And some of them think there's this thing in Tanzania. You got to know some of the history to really understand where it comes from. But I'll try to explain it as best I understand it. And there was a thing in the past where foreigners were coming in and they had a fear that the foreigners would take over their land. They'd buy up all the land, or they'd build their own interest on it, and the people would have no opportunity and no inheritance. And so they're very picky about foreigners owning land. That's why Tanzania and many countries in Africa do not allow foreigners or even citizens to own land. All of it is either owned by the president and leased to the citizens, or leased to the foreigner, or leased to the company, or it's just put on a 50-year lease or a 99-year lease or whatever. It's really a restrictive system in some ways. But if you can get past that and work around it like we tried to, then you're faced with the challenge of personal bias in these offices. And these offices are trained to be suspicious of foreigners. Not all foreigners, like Chinese, because they have such a good relationship with the country. They're not usually given such obstacles, but foreigners that don't have a strong presence or relationship in the country, such as African Americans, Americans in general, but most Americans aren't going over there to start businesses. We were, because we had a connection to the place through our ancestral bloodlines, but they were suspicious of us. And I knew that. I got called a spy when I was going to Zanzibar years ago, interrogated by these Tanzanians. They just couldn't understand, like, what does someone want to do here, of all places? And other people, same or similar experience. So it was something. A lot of great lessons and wonderful experiences, but definitely a lesson in not staying longer than you should, in going when the peace lifts, when the pillar goes, then you follow it. When the cloud moves by day and when the pillar of fire moves by night, you go, you follow it. Whatever that pillar is for you, your peace, your joy, you start feeling a pull on your sense of self-worth. Your personal values are challenged in ways that you can't get around. That's when you go. So I say this again to the people that are still there. It's okay to leave. I know you don't need me to tell you that, but maybe you need to hear it, because I sure wish I wish somebody told me to go sooner, because I could have spent the last 2 years doing the next thing. Now I'm doing the next thing and I'm happy doing the next thing, but trying to make it work when it's not supposed to won't work. Really evaluate when you need to go. So I just wanted to make that. Hopefully this isn't too long of a video, but I had to say what I had to say.
So guys, that was Mark Meets Africa, and we've just heard what he thinks of Africa, you know. I'm telling you, one time you can wake up saying something is good. The next time you wake up, you come with a different perspective. You say it's bad, you know. But one thing we need to realize is that each and every individual have their own experiences. And each country in Africa is not just one country in itself. We have 54, close to 55 countries, you know. And these 54 countries each has their own unique ways and taste. We have our own different cultures, we have our own different traditions, you know.